everyone, I'm Dan.
This is Drew.
And we're back, finally, with another episode of 4D. Today
Yep.
we're going to be talking about the new mechanics coming from Gatecrash for the respective guilds and maybe hit on a couple of the cards that have been spoiled so far from the set. Looks like it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, so there's a new mechanic, one for each of the guilds, just like they did in Ravnica. These mechanics will obviously have some sort of impact in Constructed, I'm sure, and Standard in the future. Definitely in Limited, because mechanics pretty much always do something in Limited generally. So, so there's, like I said, one for each of the guilds, and we'll probably be talking about each of those mechanics, how the mechanic impacts Constructed in terms of Standard, Modern, possibly, or Legacy. And then we'll talk about the mechanic in Limited, how the mechanic might pan out, and then maybe even a little bit of, in Commander and some of the more casual formats.
So the first one we want to talk about is Evolve, and it's from Simic.
Yep.
So you want to go ahead and tell us a little bit about Evolve?
Yeah, so the way Evolve is worded is that they're on creatures, so when another creature comes into play with greater power or toughness than that creature, it'll get a +1/+1 counter. So a lot of the Evolve creatures I've noticed start small, like they either have a low power or low toughness, or both. One, for example, is there's a 1/3 for 2 and a green with reach, and it has Evolve. So if you play a creature with 2 power, it'll get a +1/+1 counter on it. If you play a creature with 4 toughness, it'll get a +1/+1 counter on it. Evolve in Limited seems like a pretty powerful mechanic, depending on the cost of the creatures.
Sure. It helps you really get... A big thing in Limited is getting the most value out of your creatures and being able to get these guys bigger as they go along can really, extend how far they're going to help you get through that game.
Yeah, and again, it depends on where the creatures are costed.
Sure.
For example, the creature I just mentioned, it's a 1/3 for 3 with reach. As soon as you play a creature with power 2, you've instantly got Giant Spider stats for a full mana cheaper than Giant Spider. I imagine this guy is going to be a really high pick in Limited. Giant Spider, while not necessarily a super great card, I mean, it's decent at what it does, and it's a little bit stronger in core sets than it tends to be in the advanced sets.
Sure.
But if this guy becomes a 3/5, I mean, that's pretty good for
he can jump it.
Investment.
Hitting on him coming out on turn 3, like you said, following up with something, he can easily get in the way in a lot of creatures we've seen in the Limited set so far. He's ready to jump in front of guys.
Yeah. In terms of Constructed, a creature like that won't see any play.
Sure.
Just doesn't quite get what you need to in a Constructed deck. One of the creatures I think that has some possible implications in Standard is there's a 1/1 for 1 green that has Evolve, and you can remove 2 +1/+1 counters from it and regenerate it. So this guy in like a conventional kind of aggressive deck may end up panning out. Similar to like Champion of the Parish, you play this guy on turn 1. You play, like, say, a Strangleroot Dice on turn 2, he's a 2/2. Then next turn, if you play any 3-power guy, he's all of a sudden, you've got a 3/3 for essentially 1 mana, and also can potentially live through cards like Supreme Verdict.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that they are printing a lot of these cards that have interactions with these counters. So it's not only making them bigger, like you said, you have the one that can regenerate them, and they've previewed some other +1/+1 counter tricks to try to encourage some type of maybe interactions on whether or not they'll actually see Constructed play. There are some cards, and we haven't seen the whole set yet, that might encourage people to try to take advantage of this mechanic and what kind of fun things you can do with it.
Yeah. So I don't know if I've seen anything in terms of Commander, if any of these cards
not that I've noticed yet
really pan out. The Simic Guild Leader, even though she doesn't have Evolve, she does come with a bunch of counters on her.
Yeah.
She seems like she's going to be really strong in Limited, Constructed, and I'm sure Commander. She's a legendary creature, so you can even make it your general if you wanted to.
And it sounds like it'd be good interaction with, I'm not sure if they match colors. I forget what colors Gave is, but he's one of the commanders that came in one of the pre-constructed commander decks, and he loves +1/+1 counters. So I'm not sure what the colors are, but they might interact,
I think he's white, black, green.
So maybe not.
Yeah, can't quite make it work. Yeah, so
just begging for that interaction. Oh well.
But yeah, maybe some of the evolved creatures possibly have a home in like a token or like a +1/+1 counter kind of deck. So I don't know. I play a little bit of Commander here and there, not a whole lot, but I definitely have a much better feel for where the cards will fit in terms of a constructed format. So
okay, so next we have is extort. And that's from
That is Orzhov.
Orzhov, that's right.
So what extort does is when you have an extort card in play, when you cast a spell, you can pay an additional either white or black. Yeah, the hybrid mana. And then if you do, target player loses one. I think, is it target or each opponent?
I don't know.
I'm not
Let's
actually
talk
sure.
about it while I look it up.
Yeah, so it's either target player or each opponent loses a life and you gain a life. Now, extort, I'm probably the least excited about in terms of the mechanic playing out in either limited or constructed, generally because you don't want to be paying extra mana for your spells. Spells are at their best when you're getting a premium on them.
Mm-hmm.
That's why some of the best spells, in the game are cheap spells, right? Like when you look at legacy decks, they are filled to the brim with cheap spells. 4 mana tends to be the end game, the top of the curve, and there's a reason for this is because anytime you're casting a spell, you're trying to maximize your advantage by generating tempo. So paying extra mana to drain someone for 1 point isn't super exciting, I think. Now, there are obviously situations where you're just going to have spare mana lying around. This happens a lot in Limited where, it's actually probably maybe occasionally worth it to ping your opponent, for 1 or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I'd imagine in a Limited game, if it's a sort of grindy game instead of a really fast game.
It can kind of swing the favor, 1 and 1 and 1 will start adding up.
Yeah, but...
And as for reference, extort is for each opponent. If you're playing some commander shenanigans, by all means, start draining people.
Yeah, so it's like I said, it's not a mechanic I'm super excited about. The cards I've seen previewed so far, I don't think I've seen an extort card I'd want to play in constructed. Mm-hmm. I'll play them in limited. There's like a 1 and 1 white for a 2/2 that has extort. Like I'll play a grizzly bear in limited. There's a 1/4 defender for 3 that has extort. It's basically a horn turtle, so I'd probably play that guy too.
Well, and the thing to remember is that, like you said, in limited, if you have multiple cards with extort, you can do it. If you have 3 cards on the board with extort, you can pay it 3 different times, one for each card. So whether or not that will tip it into a limited favor, because like you said, sometimes in some limited games you do kind of get into those stalemates, like what's the card that I'm going to play that's going to break it open? In this case, maybe it's the 2U.
Yeah.
And now I just gain 6 life.
Yeah, and definitely if you have any sort of aggressive deck, it's possibly good in those because the aggressive decks you tend to fill up your deck with a lot of cheap creatures.
You're going to have that extra mana.
Yeah. So like once you hit 4 or 5 mana and you're playing a 2-drop and you have 2 extort cards out, then you can drain them for 2, which isn't actually that bad at that point in the game. Yeah. It's just, again, I'm probably not looking to really try...
Orzhov doesn't feel like the guild that you're going to be aggroing out and then your curve ending on 3 and leaving yourself open mana.
Yeah, I don't see myself really trying to force like... a kind of extort deck. I mean, maybe I'm underrating the mechanic here, but I just...
And there's still cards you haven't seen where it's just kind of, what we've previewed so far. It's a big set, mind you. Gatecrash is, as big as Return to Ravnica. It's a full-size set.
Yeah, so I'm a little skeptical on it. I will probably, if I end up playing Orzhov at the pre-release, I'm sure I'll play extort cards. Mm-hmm. I'm just not, super excited about it. The nice thing about, for example, the last mechanic Evolve is that you're getting mileage out of your mechanic without having to invest mana into it.
Yeah.
In Constructed, I haven't seen any extort cards that I think I would really play. In Commander, like you were saying, it drains everyone, so maybe it's a little bit better there.
If you like your group games, people like to play their group slug decks that affect everybody, then extort might be something you're looking for. Hey, I'm doing it to everybody.
Do you gain the life for each life lost this way, or do you just gain 1 life? Because if it's like gain life for each life lost this way, you can gain
and
life.
you gain that much life.
Yeah, so you hit 4 players with an extort, you gain 4 life. So might have some potential in Commander.
Mm-hmm.
So the next mechanic is Battalion.
And this is from Boros. Yeah. I know this one. I'm looking forward to Boros.
Yeah, this is the Boros mechanic. So Battalion is whenever this and another 2 creatures...
Two other creatures
attack, you get whatever the Battalion effect is.
And that's a little different from what we've seen so far between Evolve and Extort, where Evolve you get the counter, Extort's the drain life, Battalion's like, this happened, this is the effect, and we're going to fill in the blank here. So it's a more open-ended
Yeah.
mechanic of the 3 that we've covered so far.
Yeah, pretty much. So the 2 that I've seen, I don't know if there's. Oh no, I've seen 3.
There's
actually.
a couple.
Yeah, I've seen 3. There might be a couple more, but the 3 that I can think of is there's the 1 mana guy. He's a 1/1 for 1. Whenever him or 2 other creatures, or whatever the battalion.
When he gets battalion.
Yeah, he gets +2/+2. So he's a 3/3. The other one is the medic.
Frontline medic.
Yeah, 2 and a white for a 3/3. When it and 2 other attacks, all the creatures you control that attack are indestructible. And then the other one is, I believe it's the Game Day Top 8 promo. It's a rare. It's
is it
2,
the angel?
Yeah, 2 and a red and a white for the 3/3 flyer. When it attacks, it deals 3 damage to. Well, when it attacks and 2 other creatures attack.
When we get battalion.
Yeah, it deals 3 damage to something, and then you gain 3 life.
Yeah.
I'm in limited. I'm pretty excited to have either the medic or the angel in my deck. Though they're rares, though, so
yeah.
You're
not gonna get too many of both of them.
They're probably gonna be decent. I'm not really super excited about the other guy, the 1/1 for 1. It might be okay in limited, possibly. I mean, the fact that you can play an early drop, maybe get in for 1 or 2 points, and then him turning into a 3/3 later on down the road means that he might actually be one of those 1 mana 1/1s. Generally, I avoid him in limited, but if they can get bigger than like a 1/1, then I'm a little bit more inclined to play it. So it's possible he's decent. I don't think I would play that kind of guy in a sealed deck, though. Sealed decks tend to be slower than draft decks.
He's going to lose that value as the game goes on.
Yeah, and you always have to have 2 other creatures attacking, and sometimes you won't have favorable attacks, or you have to throw away a lot just to trigger the battalion.
Sure.
Now the other 2, they're decent on their own in limited. Like, I'm perfectly fine playing a 3/3 for 3. The fact that it gives all your guys indestructible is actually really good. Works really well with battalion because you're like, I'm attacking with a lot of guys and I don't have to worry about what happens.
No combat tricks are going to affect me. It doesn't matter what you're going to do. My guys are getting through here unless you bust out a tragic clip or something, which you're not going to see in limited.
Yeah, and then the angel is obviously really strong. If you trigger it once, getting a lightning helix off your 3/3 flyer is really strong. In constructed, I don't think I see these guys panning out. At least the ones I've seen. Just because again, a 1/1 for 1 that you have to have 2 other guys attacking is, I mean, that can be a pretty big, pretty steep, price to pay for even an aggressive deck. Because a lot of times in aggressive decks, you'll play a threat, and then they'll kill a threat, and then if they kill 1 or 2 of your other guys, and you just have this 1/1 for 1, he doesn't really get you a whole lot of mileage.
And if you're playing Boros, you have to look at, if you're playing constructed, you're looking at competing 1-drops like you mentioned, Champion of the Parish, or maybe even Stormkirk Noble. It's like, are those guys, is this 1/1 that can become a 3/3 temporarily going to be better in your 1 slot than other options if you're playing this type of aggro deck?
Yeah, and even a nice basic aggressive creature like Rakdos Cackler, which is obviously seen a lot of constructed play.
Sure.
Yeah, the good thing about Rakdos, a card like Rakdos Cackler versus the I have no idea what the guy's name is, but the 1/1, the battalion guy, is that he represents a clock the turn you play him.
Yeah.
Whereas when you play this guy, from turn 1 on, odds are you're not going to trigger him. Even if you have the ideal draw, you don't trigger him until turn 3 attacking. And then you have to have 2 other 1-drops for that to work. A lot of times you'll see the mono-red decks that have a lot of really cheap early aggressive creatures. They'll just do a 1-drop into a 2-drop. And a 1-drop into a 2-drop with this guy means you're not doing a whole lot of damage with him. So, I mean, maybe, but I doubt it. Possibly block, but I'm still pretty skeptical about it. The Angel, unfortunately, has to deal with Restoration Angel. Restoration Angel pretty much laughs this guy off because you attack with 3 guys, you get the battalion trigger, then whatever you target, they angel it, and then now they have a 3/4 blocker, and they stop the battalion. So in a world full of Restoration Angels, I feel like this guy just isn't going to quite cut the mustard.
So now another thing to consider about, we've seen Frontline Medic, is he has a second ability of being able to sacrifice himself to counter an X spell unless the caster pays 3 additional mana. Which can... we've seen a lot of X spells running around the format. Sphinx's Revelation, Rakdos' Return. We've seen Aurelia's Fury. And sure, if he's on the board, they know what's going to happen, but it does hinder plans a little bit. Maybe they're not getting quite as much value out of those cards that they wanted, or it sets them back a couple turns. So it's a secondary effect that's worth noting if you plan on playing the guy.
Yeah, medic is probably the closest to being constructed playable. I'm still not really sure on it though, mostly because it has a lot of steep competition. I think there's a lot of really strong cards in standard right now. You compare it to 3-drops like Locks and Unsmiter. It's struggling to keep pace with a card like that just on raw stats alone.
Guys of St. Trapped.
Yeah, Guys of St. Trapped is another great example of a 3-drop. And being gold isn't really a drawback. Mana bases are really strong right now.
There's plenty of dual lands to help smooth out that curve.
Three color decks are the norm. 4 color decks you don't even feel anything.
Yeah.
So I'm a little skeptical. He might see a little bit of play. Maybe sideboard play. He's probably the closest out of those 3 cards that I've seen, but I'm still not 100% sold on him and being actually good and constructed.
And then, like you said, there's plenty of 3-drops that aren't seeing play, that like Silverblade Paladin.
Silverblade Paladin's actually seen a decent amount of play. The green-white deck's playing, and also the new the Aura deck, which I think is going to take off.
Oh, that's
popularity.
Right. The modern one.
No.
Or is there the Type 2 one?
The Grand Prix this weekend, there were 2 in the finals of the Grand Prix at a 1600 person Grand Prix. Less than 15 players played Ethereal Armor, Rancor, and Spectral Flight in their constructed decks. 2 of them were in the finals of the Grand Prix, so I expect the deck to take off in popularity. But yeah, that deck was playing, I think it was actually 2 different lists. Josh Utterlayton from Channel Fireball got second, was playing a list, and then the guy that won was playing a different list. I think Utterlayton had Silverblade Paladin, I think the other guy didn't. I'm not 100%. If I got the information wrong, I got it wrong.
But it is popping up, and he's been around, he's always been that guy. He's like, hey, look at me, I can do fun stuff. And if he's finding a home, I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, and that's another good example is that, Silverblade Paladin versus this guy, odds are you want Silverblade Paladin, especially because Paladin has a lot of synergy with a lot of cards. Cards like Rancor, cards like Wolfrey Silverheart, cards like Spectral Flight, cards like Ethereal Armor. So the guy has a lot of synergy where the other guy is, he's a 3/3 for 3, has an effect, don't know how good the effect is, don't know how much blocking's going on. So I'm a little skeptical. I'm not sure where these guys fit in Commander. I don't know if you're really attacking with 3 creatures a lot.
It really depends on the type of deck you're playing. Right now, aggro decks aren't unheard of. Aurelia, the Boros Guildmaster, could be its own commander for a red-white aggro deck with, you can end a game pretty quick if you get 2 attack steps every turn.
Yeah.
So, kind of, see what kind of pops up. They're not, unheard of. I'm not going to see the frontline medic being sacked in Commander anytime soon for a counter spell, but indestructibility is nothing to scoff at in these big slugfests that you get into sometimes.
I guess another advantage with Battalion and Commander is the fact that you can attack different opponents.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, if, say, you're playing the Angel and you have the Angel out, and then you have 2 other, like, ground guys, and, you're like, well, I really want to, deal damage to this guy or whatever, but, I need to be able to attack with 3 guys. You can attack like 1 guy with your Angel, and then you can attack the guy without any creatures with your other 2 guys.
Use the trigger effect to pick somebody off.
Rather than running your 2 guys headlong into combat, whereas in conventional matches, either limited or standard, you always have to be concerned about the blockers they have available.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so let's ramble a little bit about a Battalion, so let's move on to Cipher.
So the Cipher is the dimmer mechanic. So Cipher is when you play a spell with the Cipher mechanic, you then get to basically put the spell, it's like you exile the spell onto a creature you control, and then when the creature deals combat damage to a player, you get to cast the spell again.
And so far we've seen, the first one that I saw previewed was essentially Windfall for 4. It was each player discards their hand and then draws the most number of cards discarded this way.
Yeah, I haven't really been super excited about many of the Cipher cards. I think they're all a little too overcosted.
And I think that's one of those side effects. They're like, well, we can't make this too good. We need, what's the drawback of being able to cast this, when it hurt somebody. So like you said, they're a little above the curve on what you see if the card was just by itself.
Yeah, so I mean, and someone pointed this out to me that like Cipher is in a lot of ways similar to creature enchantments, right? That like you play the spell, you put it on a creature, and then obviously that creature becomes a target, right? Like your opponent wants to block that creature. They want to use a removal spell on that creature. They don't want you getting an effect of a spell every turn. So like I said, and I haven't been super excited with any of the cards that have come out. In limited, there's some of the cards are probably decent, like the one that makes a 1/1 flyer or whatever. Like if you go make a 1/1 flyer, if you can put it on, an evasive guy or whatever, you can hit him, get another 1/1 flyer, and then potentially threaten to do that again. That's pretty good, I think. I mean, the clone one I think is really good in limited because if you can hit him once with it, you've got 2 clones for 6 mana, which is pretty strong in limited. In constructed, 6 mana is pretty steep to be playing. A great example is the transition we've seen in standard. Last standard season, Phantasmal Image was a pretty prominent player. Phyrexian Metamorph saw a lot of play, and now people tried playing clone a little bit, but it's pretty much not. I haven't seen any play. 4 mana is just a little too much to be paying for a clone effect, and 6 mana that's quite a bit to be paying for a clone effect. So,
especially in the format that we're seeing, where on turn 5 people are running into you with Thunder Maws and things like that. 6 just seems like at that point a lot of that should have you dead by then.
Well, I mean, I can't remember. Was it? Drawing a blank on the guy, Dave Humphreys. I think Dave Humphreys pointed out, because he was on the design team for Gatecrash, that if someone plays a Thundermaw and then you can clone the Thundermaw and then cipher onto your clone and then attack and then you get another Thundermaw, that's not bad. But I mean, it's a little bit of a corner case. And again, you're paying 6 mana. A lot of times, my guess is you're going to be paying 6 mana and copying. Even if you copy a Thragtusk, which is fine, 6 is a lot, I think, for what you're asking out of the spell. So I'm a little skeptical on it. In limited, if the spell effect is decent enough, then yeah, you'll probably play it and be fine with it. In Commander, I think maybe a little bit more play. There could be a little
room for that.
Yeah, because again, the advantage of when you're playing versus multiple opponents, a lot of times it's easier for you to be able to deal damage or attack someone in general because someone probably doesn't have creatures to play.
Easy to get the trigger, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, and next up we have Blood Rush from Gruul.
Yep. So basically, Blood Rush is the slang for it would be called like a pump mechanic. So pump spells are spells that increase the power and toughness of your creature temporarily. The classic example is Giant Growth. Yeah, so what Blood Rush is, it's on the Gruul creatures, and you pay a certain, whatever the Blood Rush cost is, and you'll give that creature, you can give an attacking creature power and plus toughness equal to the power and toughness of the creature that you use to Blood Rush. So maybe that's a little confusing, but basically, so for example, one of the common ones is 3, a red and a green, and it's a 5/4, and you can pay 1 a red and a green, discard it from your hand, give target attacking creature +5/+4 until the end of the turn. I like these a lot in limited. So far, the creatures I've seen, I'd be perfectly reasonably happy playing in limited. A 5/4 for 5 is fine.
Definitely.
Not super exciting, but perfectly reasonable creature.
He gets in the way of things. It's hard for other people to get in the way of him. Big guys are perfectly acceptable.
Reasonably sized creature I'm happy to play with. The fact that it's also a spell as well is kind of nice.
Uncounterable spell.
Yeah. So the fact that it's a spell is kind of nice as well, because sometimes it's good to have what people call tricks, and pump spells fall into this category. Where your opponent isn't always sure whether they should be blocking or not blocking, because if you have the trick or whatever, especially if they're in a situation where I need to double block or whatever. So I actually like these a lot in limited. The flexibility they offer is really nice, and as long as the creatures are reasonable, which all of them I've seen so far seem reasonable, then you're going to be happy to play them in a sealed deck or in a draft deck.
For sure.
In constructed, the only one that I've seen that has really constructed applications, and it actually seems like it is really strong in constructed, he's a 4/4 for 4 with trample. not super exciting. You know, creatures have gotten so strong now that 4/4 for 4th trample is not quite strong enough by themselves. But his blood rush cost is a red and a green. So you can pay a red and a green, give an attacking creature +4/+4 in trample. This is a really strong pump spell.
And this is that's the rare one, right?
It's an uncommon.
Oh, uncommon. That's right. I was thinking different one.
Yeah, so this is a really, I think, a really strong spell. The fact that it gives your guy trample is really good. It'll let you, I think, alpha strike a lot of the times. It'll push through the damage you need to in an aggressive deck. So I really like this guy a lot. I would not be surprised to see this guy seen playing constructed. I'm in Commander. I'm not really sure.
Once again, I think it depends on the type of decks people are playing. You know, there's still plenty of decks out there that are all about turning creatures sideways, and like you said, getting in there for the alpha strike, so to speak, it can be a big deal. You know.
Yeah, I think the rare guy is equal to the number of lands you have.
Maybe.
I think it's a creature with power and toughness equal to the lands you have, and I think you can pay 1 red and a green and give an attacking creature +X/+X, where X is the number of lands you have. Possibly that's good in Commander. You know, it comes out of nowhere.
Especially, you know, it's like, okay, +16, +16.
Yeah, because Commander games go so long. In Limited, this guy's probably decent too. I don't think super great, though. The fact that he's just a vanilla creature isn't great. If you play him as a creature, he's easy to block or just chump block. The spell itself, the fact that, you know, if they block all your guys, doesn't give it trample is kind of a big deal. In Constructed, I doubt it'll see any play. You know, compared to the efficiency of the +4/+4,
only 2,
and trample. Trample is kind of a big deal, you know,
because it's no longer just a giant growth to save your guy. It's, oh, I'm going to give him +4/+4, and you know, after I finish your guy off, we'll still going to get damage through it. It's serving a very big purpose that a lot of pump spells don't normally do.
Yeah. So that one I think is the one that really stood out for me out of you know, the cards we have seen so far. So I mean,
and it's uncommon.
So you know, it's a pretty decent spell. Maybe people should be busting out their flint hook force. So maybe that guy will actually start seeing a little bit of playing constructed. We'll see here. But yeah, so I think all the mechanics are fairly interesting. They all kind of do different things, and they fit, I think, very well thematically with each of the guilds. So that's pretty cool. You know.
It was kind of fun is thinking about like that +4/+4. If you're playing, you know, if you're playing a red-green aggro deck, Huntmaster's still seeing play. If you got him flipped over, giving him that +4/+4 doesn't trigger him to flip back over if you're casting another spell that turn.
That's a good point, actually. So yeah, so I mean, you can attack with your Huntmaster,
cast
Blood Rush, and well, you don't even have to cast it.
Well, I mean, if you still want to cast something else, you know, you don't have to worry about that being your second spell for the turn.
Oh, well, I mean, like let's say like you cast Huntmaster and then they play a spell, and then you attack with your Huntmaster, and then you can pump your guy and then not play any spells. So not only do you save your Huntmaster, get him for 6 points of damage, and flip him over, that seems really strong, actually. That was a good point, pointing out the implication of Blood Rush with the werewolf mechanic. So, yeah, so my guess is that card's going to see probably a decent amount of play if there's any sort of red-green aggro deck. So,
and like I said, the sets, we haven't seen the whole set yet. Not only could there be plenty of great red-green cards, there could be cards that shift our opinion on how these mechanics work out, because I don't think we've maybe seen a third of the set so far, if that.
I think it's a little more than a third. It's like 40% or something like that, yeah.
Because we still got a ways off, and we're seeing new previews every day. I'm expecting a new batch up here in another couple hours.
Yeah, a couple hours we'll see the new ones. My guess is I think they'll have the whole set out. I think, do they normally have it the week out before the pre-release?
Roughly, yeah.
Yeah, it's generally about a week. So probably by the end of this week, if we don't have the full set, we'll see most of the cards, I'd imagine.
So it looks like it's going to be a lot of fun. There's cards that not only have the guild mechanics, that's all kinds of crazy stuff. There's Enter the Infinite, which is just begging to have something crazy done with it if a door wants to hang around.
Play with Omniscience, because that's got to be the sweetest thing ever, is if you play Omniscience, draw your whole deck, and then get to play your whole deck. So
Enter the Infinite, in case you haven't seen it, is, like Drew said, you draw your entire deck, put one card back from your hand on top of your deck, and until your next turn, you don't have a maximum hand size.
Yeah.
So it's just begging for you to be all the things.
It works very well with Omniscience, we'll say that.
We've seen Aurelius Fury. We've seen the Gruul X spell, which for the life of me I can't remember the name of it.
Clan Defiance.
Yes, which looks good. It could be pretty good. It has a lot of modal options to it.
Possibly. I'm actually kind of skeptical on all the X spells I've seen so far. Everyone I know is going nuts for Aurelius Fury, and
I like it.
I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say I don't think it's gonna be quite what people are expecting out of it. It will see play, I'm sure, but my guess is it's gonna see play in. The problem is in like in a conventional aggro deck. You're generally not gonna have. You're not gonna get up to more than like 5 or 6 lands, right? So you have to kind of ask yourself, like, if I play Aurelius Fury, even for like 6 mana, so for X is 4, like, what am I getting out of it?
Sure.
You know, is that better than like Bonfire? You know, like, I think even like a non-miracle Bonfire a lot of times is better than like what Aurelius Fury is.
You think so? The fact that you can, you know, like, okay, so so and so's attacking me with a Grave Color or a Diregraph Ghoul and something else. You're like 1, 2. Here and some to you?
Sure, but I could have just, like, cast the Bonfire in my hand, right? Like, say it was Bonfire instead of Aurelius Fury, I could have just been like, Bonfire your board for 2, right? And obviously Bonfire, when you top deck it, I think is going to be way stronger than Aurelius Fury, like, in any situation. So it may be that...
Now, remind me, Bonfire sorcery, right?
Yes.
Because Aurelius Fury...
is an instant, yes. Yeah, I'm aware of that. I'm just saying, like, you have to consider what mileage you're getting out of it. Now, if someone can figure out how to integrate it in, say, a deck similar to Omnidor or some sort of ramp deck where you have a ton of mana and you can actually get a lot of value out of X. You know, when X is like 10 on that thing, then sure, it's going to do a lot for you. But it just doesn't feel like it's going to have quite the same impact that a card like Sphinx's Revelation is going to have.
Sure. Now, I don't remember your list for Omnidor, but did you leave your fogs or take... I don't remember if you have fogs in your list anymore.
I left 1 in.
Okay. Because I know, like, me thinking about Omnidor, where it fits in is, like, I know... If only running 1 or 2 fogs, I like the fact that that's one of the secondary effects for Aurelius Fury is tapping creatures, which can tap the Aristocrats and the Thundermaws and all those cards that come in. You're like, crap.
Sure, but like, and that may be where like Aurelius Fury is good, is because it is modal. It can do multiple things. You know, like if you need a way to kill off a control deck, you can use it that way. If you need a way to stop an attack, you can do that. I'm still not really.
Understandable.
I'm not 100% sold on the card yet. So like I'm kind of in the skeptical camp right now. I don't feel like you're gonna quite get the mileage out of the card that, you know, everyone is thinking that they're gonna get out of the card. So again, you have to compare it to cards like Bonfire or cards like Sphinx's Revelation, where the impact of X is huge.
Yeah.
You know, wiping their board, where Aurelius Fury, sometimes you won't even wipe their board. If you do it for 5, like, what are you killing with that? 1 Huntmaster? Whereas if you, like, Miracle of Bonfire for 5, you are killing their whole team. Like, all of them are dying. So...
Okay. So, before that's up, last question, before we wrap this up, I didn't enunciate a promise. Favorite charm so far?
Civic Charm.
Civic Charm?
Easy. Like that.
Remind everyone what Civic Charm does.
That charm is sweet. So Civic Charm is blue and a green, gives target creature +3/+3, return target creature to its owner's hand, or permanents you control have hexproof until the end of turn. That charm is sweet. I love it. Like I always kind of like bounce effects. I've done really well with decks like aggro control decks that have some sort of unsummon effect, or creatures that have unsummon effects. And the fact that this does that, and it has a giant growth on it, and it has another ability as well, I'm in love with that charm. So I think it's really awesome.
Rock on. I like Boros. The Boros charm is really fantastic in my opinion. Being able to give creatures double strike, or being able to deal 4 damage to a player. And now I gotta remember what the third modal ability is.
Permanents you control are indestructible until the end of turn?
Yes.
Yeah.
I like that if you end up playing the aggro decks. It's like, I like it in the fact that if they try, Supreme Verdict your creatures or those Miracle Bonfires,
you
like,
basically can counter it. Yeah.
Cool story.
Yeah, it seems really, really strong. And the fact that you know, versus a control deck, if you leave mana up and they try and verdict, and then you can give them indestructible, and then if they play around your Boros Tom, so if they're like, well, I'm going to do some other stuff, you can always just dome them for 4 and not waste your turn, you know, as opposed to being like, well, I'm stuck with this card in my hand or whatever. So yeah, that one does seem pretty sweet. But I'm a little partial to the bouncing in the palm because, you know, Simic is it's a pretty awesome card.
Yeah, they're all, that's Giant Growth and Unsummon have always been fantastic cards, and giving you the option is in one card is fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think we're going to wrap it up. I think we ran a little longer than we wanted, but that's okay since it's our first video back. So we look forward to seeing everyone at the Gatecrash pre-release, and we want to thank you for watching.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Test on fire.